Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Lunch Lab today. I'm Sally Delisle, co-owner and director of trainings at Childlight Education Company. Our mission is providing wellness education to create happy, healthy, and resilient youth and families. Today, we are talking with Sarah Kirk from Yoga for Classrooms, also a current and former school counselor. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sally.
Absolutely. So Sarah has extensive experience successfully implementing yoga and mindfulness in the classroom as a school counselor, seeing firsthand the positive impact of yoga and mindfulness practices in the schools. Sarah, would you like to say a bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, I was fortunate in 2015 to receive a grant to add yoga and mindfulness to my comprehensive school counseling program at a school in Oklahoma. And through that grant, I received some resources, yoga mats, that type of material. And so I started doing just that, implementing yoga and mindfulness in our school, mostly through an after school yoga program. And following a couple of years of that, I realized that we were having great success. I was loving it. My students were really loving it. However, I didn't have any formal training. Fortunately, one of those resources that I had received through the grant was the Yoga for Classrooms activity cards. And I started looking more into those activity cards and found Childlight and found that Childlight and Yoga for Classrooms offered training. And I knew I needed that. I needed more training. I had the passion, I had the desire, I had the students that were eager. However, I didn't have any formal training. Personally, I had a very beginning yoga practice myself. I had not found yoga until my mid 20s. And so I was just beginning to develop that personal practice. And so I knew that I needed to learn more. So I applied for another grant, and this grant took me all the way to Dover, New Hampshire in 2019 to go through the Child Light extensive immersion program in the summer. And I was able to go through many different courses of learning about yoga and mindfulness for children and yoga and mindfulness in schools. And so I came back from that much more equipped to really lead this work. And then I was fortunate to get to do just that, leading yoga and mindfulness at two different schools. We had lots of different ways we implemented it within the schools, which I'm sure we'll talk more about today. But I just really did, as you said, saw firsthand how impactful it could be through really intentional and effective implementation. And fortunately, I also, in addition to my school counseling work, I've done some school counseling training and consulting, and that led me to be able to help train others to become um, to implement more yoga and mindfulness in their schools. And so that gave me another perspective of how impactful it can be, being able to train the trainers, so to speak. And that was really wonderful as well. And then fast forward to 2023, and I had the very fortunate opportunity to become the owner of Yoga for Classrooms. And it was a pretty easy yes when I had spent so many years implementing it, seeing how impactful it can be, and really having that strong desire to continue to grow the number of schools that are implementing yoga and mindfulness.
You just shared so many things that are extremely exciting to me, and perhaps to people that are watching or listening today as they eat their lunch during this lunch lab. So, one thing that I am really thinking about right now that you said is that you discovered yoga and mindfulness in your 20s and went on to share it with so many students that you work with. And I hear that from many people that I work with, many adults, that they discovered yoga later in life. It is beyond exciting to me now that we have the tools, the capacity, the knowledge to share yoga with youth, and that we're bringing it to the schools, we're bringing it to the after school programs. We have all these new tools to do it. And at the same time, we are benefiting from the practice as we share it, as we're breathing with our students, as we are stepping onto the mat or standing behind a chair or sitting in a chair practicing at the same time with our students. So it really impacts not only the people that we are sharing the practice with, but it also serves ourselves at the same time. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that as an educator, your jobs are hard, your jobs are exhausting, their burnout levels are at an all-time high. And by adding simple mindful moments into the school day, it might even be more beneficial for the adults. And again, I can speak firsthand to that. I often tell the story of a time I was doing a bullying prevention lesson with a group of third graders, and those particular third graders on that particular day were giving me a run for my money. They were having a hard time listening, having a hard time sitting still. And as a school counselor, I only had so much time with them to teach these lessons. And I was having a hard time getting the content through, and I paused. And luckily, this was after going through yoga for classrooms and childlike training. So I realized in that moment I was getting dysregulated. I was no longer able to be the best I could be, and there was certainly no way we were going to move forward with that lesson in the state that both myself and the students were in. And so we took a mindful moment, and I can promise you in that moment it was as impactful, if not more, for me. And we were able to recover, and the lesson went on. And I don't know what I would have done in that situation had I not had those tools and that training to just pause and take that moment for us. And that's why I think it's really important to have resources that are easy to implement. In yoga for classrooms, we really strive to make it easy, plug and play type implementation, because again, in that moment, when I was teaching that lesson, I didn't have the capacity to think creatively about what I was going to do, but I did have the capacity to pull a card and read a quick imagination vacation mindful moment for all of us. And so I think that's especially important. I also want to real quick mention what you had said about me having my practice not start until my 20s, and the really neat and cool fact that we're getting it to so many children much earlier than that. That is truly one of my favorite things about this work. I say all the time that we don't know when children might need to access that tool. I know that I taught yoga and mindfulness to a lot of students that maybe at the time didn't need it on a day-to-day basis. Some of my students did utilize it on a daily basis. They needed those breathing breaks and those different mindfulness tools all the time, even starting at 5 and 6 years old. But some of my students didn't. They practiced it, they learned it, but they weren't needing to retrieve that tool every single day due to their ability to cope and to manage their emotions at the time. However, we never know when that might shift, when something might happen that would really benefit them to have that tool in their tool belt. As a school counselor, I always said that was one of my biggest jobs, is to give students all the tools they might need later on. And I think that's so impactful. I think if I would have had yoga and mindfulness through the stressors of college and my first big exams and things like that that happened along the way, I could have really benefited from that as an overachieving perfectionist. And so, yes, I think that's super powerful that our kids are getting these tools so much earlier and then able to retrieve them as needed.
You bring up such a good point, and I actually had 3 separate conversations with 3 separate people this past week without any of them knowing that they were talking about the same thing to me. And that is that it's so important to know and learn these tools, self-regulation tools, before you need them. Because when we are in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a breakdown, in the middle of a tragedy, trying to recuperate after or calm the nervous system after a fire drill, that is not the time to teach a breathing technique.
Right.
It's beforehand, and then you pull out your breathing ball or you breathe together, not talking, because they already know how to do it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's nearly impossible to implement once the brain is already activated. And I often tell educators that I think we forget that sometimes, and then we think it doesn't work. We're like, wait, we tried that breathing activity and the escalation continued. But once we've entered escalation, it's very difficult. However, it can be retrieved in those moments as we are beginning to escalate if it's taught, which again is a really foundational principle of yoga for classrooms and of the work that I did as a school counselor, and that we really want this to be seen as a school-wide preventative technique, not a as needed only in extreme situations. We might need to use it then, but we really want it taught school-wide. We want all students having these tools so that exactly what you said, when they need it, they can retrieve it.
All students, all humans, inside
Yes.
and outside the building, and bring them home
Yep.
as
Yep.
well, and get
Absolutely.
everyone on board.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Sarah, would you tell us a bit more about the role of a school counselor? Because there's more to it, that
Yes.
you wear many hats, not just
Yes.
teaching yoga and mindfulness.
Yes. Yeah, the role of the school counselor is quite complex and often misunderstood. School counselors are trained, as I just mentioned, to create preventative supports for all students. So I think many people see the counselors in the buildings as, like we said, kind of that emergency resource. However, ideally, school counselors are building programs that really preventatively meet the needs of all students. And then we can also respond as needed when more intensive supports are needed. However, we really want all students having those resources, all students being served. The school counselor's role really covers 3 big domains. We want to make sure we're meeting the academic development, the college and career development, and the social and emotional development of all students. Often that part's misunderstood as well. Even in our high schools, we don't only want school counselors helping with college and career. We really want to see them focusing on all 3 of those domains. And the opposite is true as well. Even starting as young as elementary school, we want our school counselors having those beginning exposure conversations about college and career, and also the academic side as well, even though the social and emotional ends up taking up a lot of time of our elementary school counselors. But it is important that we see all 3 of those domains at all levels in school counseling. Another big role of the school counselor is that we serve as a collaborator and a consultant with other educators in the building. So we're really meant to work collaboratively as a team with teachers, principals, special education, all of those different pieces, so that we can all bring our expertise to the table and really collaboratively meet the needs of students. So that's the other big piece there. School counselors also often work with outside resources, community agencies, mental health agencies, those types of resources, to make sure that students and their families have the needed resources and making the connections, the referrals as needed as well. So, like you said, yes, many, many hats. School counselors often say no 2 day is ever the same. And there's always a lot of things. You also mentioned that, of course, yoga and mindfulness isn't the only thing school counselors do, and that is certainly true. However, I found as a school counselor who implemented yoga and mindfulness that some of the other elements were easier because I had implemented yoga and mindfulness school wide. And so there's certainly many benefits of that being a part of a school counselor's program.
Mm, thank you. That was a wonderful explanation, having it laid out like that, very clear. You shared that you started out with a yoga and mindfulness program that was offered after school, and it evolved perhaps to during the school day as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Would you be open to sharing an example or a short lesson with us now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So let me think. I have so many examples, so many stories I could share. As you mentioned, it did start with an after school yoga club, and we transitioned from there into the the real school wide implementation. Honestly, because I was following my students' lead, I was able to see that they wanted more than just after school. Also, quick kind of plug for how successful it was. Again, I had no idea it would be this successful, but I followed my students' lead. When I mentioned the grant I got, I had 25 yoga mats. So my first yoga club was with 25 students because that's all I could include. So I just offered a sign up, and the first 25 to sign up got to be a part of it. And by the time I was at that school for 3 more years, and by the time I left that school, I had doubled the amount of mats I had. So we had 50 mats, and we were offering the club every single day, but a different group of students came. So each student only went once a week, but we were offering it every single day because we had hundreds of people that were interested in it. So it was really neat to see a teeny tiny 25-person group grow that substantially in a short period of time. But because of that growth, we really saw that we needed to be doing more than the after school club. One thing that I did that I'll share, and I'll grab a resource here in just a second so I can do a little example. But one example that I'll share beyond the club was we had a second grade class that was familiar with the yoga and mindfulness because we had implemented it school wide by this point. But this particular second grade class, by November, school had started in August, and by November, the number of discipline referrals in that class was double what the number of discipline referrals was in the rest of the school combined. So this one particular class had twice as many behavior referrals as the whole rest of the school. So you can imagine that was troublesome. And those students were really having a hard time. It was a first year teacher, a wonderful teacher, dedicated, very talented, but she was having a very difficult time with that group. And so I worked with the teacher, and we decided to implement an intervention where we did 5 minutes of mindfulness every morning before they did anything else. That particular school ate breakfast in the classrooms. And so we would go in while they were eating breakfast, and I led it at first, and then eventually I got to where the teacher felt comfortable implementing it. But let me grab my cards real quick. Okay. Thought I had them right there, but I don't. But that's okay. I can do it off the top of my head as well. But the Yoga for Classrooms cards that we used in that 5 minutes they're just already, the script is already there for you. And so if
I have mine.
you want to
You want
show
mine?
us,
Yeah.
sure. Yes, I do. Okay, there they are. Awesome. So you can see there that Sally's holding them up. And actually, Sally, exciting news. We have a brand new design that now goes with our new website and everything, all of our marketing. So
Nice.
just brand new, like last week. If you order the cards, they look a little bit different, but only the outside. The content has remained the same. But as
Awesome.
Sally was showing you, those cards have different categories. We have movements that can be done in your desk, so seated postures. We have standing. We have what I love the most is the imagination vacation
Okay.
cards. Yep, there's a seated one. But the imagination vacation cards are the purple cards that you'll find in there. And those were the ones I did most often with this group that was getting the 5 minute intervention each day, because as you can see, there you go, that's one of my favorites. As you can see there, the imagination vacation ones are just really quick guided meditations, guided mindful moments that can be read right off the back of the card with ease. Oh, I love gratitude relaxation. So gratitude relaxation, if you're familiar with meditations or any sort of guided meditations, the gratitude relaxation is very similar to like a loving kindness meditation. However, it's developmentally appropriate for our younger learners, and it really walks them through thinking through who they're grateful for, someone they want to express gratitude to. So those are some of the things we would do, and it was super easy. It took no preparation on our side as educators. But it's a fun example of showing just how easy and impactful it can be. Oh, and the best part I forgot to share. The best part was the incredible decrease in behavior referrals we saw in that classroom. Truly, the teacher described it as a miracle. She was like, I think that something like a miracle has happened. What has changed? And what we really saw was that it was a group of students that were coming from chaotic home environments, and they were coming into the classroom, and they weren't ever calming before the day started. And so that teacher was jumping to try to teach ELA and to teach math, and these little bodies that were already really escalated and that it just weren't prepared to learn. And so of course that's when we saw those behaviors time and time again. So it makes sense that that simple 5 minutes of calming them down made such a difference for them. And of course, as we talked about earlier, this was another group that really needed those tools in their tool belt. And so as we did these every single day, they were really quick to retrieve those tools. And you can't expect students to have the ability to utilize a tool like that if they haven't used it over and over with practice and repetition. But this group did. And so then when they needed to retrieve that tool later, they were really able to. So that's an example I love. Was very easy. Like I said, as the school counselor, I started out implementing it. I would go visit the classroom every day, but probably like 3 weeks in, the teacher was able to do it. She would just pull the cards and implement it herself. And like I said she thought it was a miracle. So lots of fun examples, but that's one of my favorite stories.
That's a wonderful story. It was very helpful for all of them to become centered.
Hmm.
So they were then on the
Absolutely.
same page moving forward. And it probably really assisted the teacher, the educator as well, and
Oh
helped
yeah.
her take a few breaths and get grounded. And okay, now we can move forward.
Yep.
It's,
Absolutely.
it's like us having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea in the morning instead of jumping out of bed and just going off
Yes.
running.
Yep. Yep. And I think this
Beautiful. I love it.
particular teacher, as I mentioned, she was new to the profession, and it was one of those things where they were having such a difficult time, but then she would show up to school anxious about what the day was going to bring. And so you're exactly right. It gave her that moment to ground herself, remind herself that she was, she had it under control. She had the skills needed, but I think it helped her a lot too, because it had really progressed to be a pretty anxiety provoking situation for her as well. And so
Yeah.
it got all of them to start off. And on that point, I often tell educators that it's okay to tell our students that we need the moment as well. I think that really humanizes us as educators, and it shows students that people of all ages need these tools. And so to say, I think I need to do the gratitude relaxation real quick. What about you all? Is a really strong relationship builder with your students. It builds community. And like you said, it also gives you all that moment to really ground, calm, and carry on.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that
Yeah,
with us. Lovely.
absolutely.
So, how can people find you? How can people find more resources and information on yoga and mindfulness and school
Sure.
counseling?
Yeah, sure. So I can share all of the above. So, like I said, we're Yoga for Classrooms, the number four. So you can find Yoga for Classrooms at yogaforclassrooms.com. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, all by the same at Yoga, the number four classrooms. So you can find all things Yoga for Classrooms there. I'm also more than willing to help in any way. We have a contact us page on our website. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to chat with you about how you can get yoga and mindfulness implemented in your school or classroom. For school counseling, I also do lots of school counseling work as well. You can find me on social media at counselor_Kirk. And I also have a website, counselorkirk.com, where I share lots of resources and ways to learn more as a school counselor, not only yoga and mindfulness, but all components of comprehensive school counseling. So you can find me there. And I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of the above. So you can find me on all of those. And I truly have a strong belief that we are better together, and we're better when we're collaborating and learning from one another. And that's why I love working with Child Light, and also why I am more than willing to do anything I can to support all of our amazing educators out there, because it's a hard job and we need to support one another. And I want to be a part of that. So I'm happy to help in any way.
We feel the exact same way. We appreciate you and all the work you're doing. We're so excited that you are now the owner and CEO of Yoga for Classrooms. We couldn't have picked anyone better for that new role, to pick up the reins from Lisa Flynn. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today and share all of your wisdom with our community. And until next time, take good care. And everyone out there, take good care, and let's go do good things out there in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Sally.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Bye,
Bye bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.